This episode I'm joined by Krzysztof Nawratek, who is a lecturer in humanities and architecture at the University of Sheffield. In this episode we discuss his book Total Urban Mobilization, Ernst Junger and the Postcapitalist City, alongside discussions on community, ethics, Marxism, progress, the forest rebel, and more. I'd like to thank all my paid subscribers and patrons for making all of this work possible, and if you would like to support Hermitix or become part of the community, please find links in the description below. Enjoy. So, Krzysztof Nawratek, thanks very much for joining us on Hermitix podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We are going to be discussing your book, Total Urban Mobilization, Ernst Junger and the Postcapitalist City, which was published in 2018. And as far as my research, I'm a big fan, it's a silly word, but a big fan of Ernst Junger. And as far as my research, as far as I can tell, there is Vincent Block's book on Ernst Junger's technology.
Yeah.
There is Elliot Neiman's biography. And outside of that, maybe I'm missing one or two, but there is not much else in English on Ernst Junger in any fashion. Not even as a World War One, as a war studies. There isn't anything on like his politics. So this is like a very rare book.
It's interesting because I know Junger for about 20 years of his work, of course, and I read the Arbeiter, the book that I'm referring to in my book, in Polish. So it was published in Polish years before it was translated and published in English. I think in English it was exactly the year that my book was published, so it's 2018 or 2017, something like that. So when I was writing then, I was changing quotes from me translating from Polish into English to translation from the English book. So in Poland, but I think that also in kind of continental Europe, Junger is better known, and in Poland there's a group of culture scholars and translators that they have been working around Junger, but also about conservative revolution, this German movement before Second World War. So there's quite a lot of materials there. Yeah. But yeah, you are right. That in English he's not extremely well known.
No. So yeah, before we jump in with the book, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do as well.
So I'm Polish immigrant working and living in the UK at that moment. I'm senior lecturer in architecture and humanities at the University of Sheffield. So in general, in my kind of daily work, I teach students how to design buildings. My research is much more theoretical. For last few years, I'm more and more interested in religion and space and spirituality and space. So at that moment, I'm working with my Brazilian colleagues on spaces for Pentecostals in Brazil. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing.
Very nice. Very nice. And yeah, before we jump headlong into the book itself and the sort of strange and quite diverse areas that it touches upon, I'm very interested in your answer. Sometimes I can sort of assume what the answer would be, but as you've written a book on Junger, you're interested in Brazilian Pentecostal architecture at the moment, and you're an architecture lecturer. I'm intrigued to see who you would place in your room. So you can place three thinkers, living or dead, into a room and listen in on the conversation. Who would you pick?
Before I answer this, I'm a little bit kind of weird architecture scholar, so I think that I never publish any article in architecture academic journal. So everything what I'm doing is kind of beyond architecture itself. So also for this question, I was thinking about this, and there was nobody who is architect. But the three people, and I'm assuming that I can keep Ernst Junger as a fourth person in the room.
Sure. Yes.
So then I would choose, I would absolutely love to have Mircea Eliade.
Mm-hmm.
So Mircea Eliade was a Romanian religious studies scholar. When he was young, he was connected with far-right Romanian movement, but also as a very young person, he spent 4 years in India on scholarship. And, as a partly anecdote, he was extremely anti-British, so he was supporting Indian independence, and he commented on British people he met in India in a very, very negative way. But he was, after the Second World War, he spent some time in France, but then he emigrated to US. He was in a Chicago University, and he's one of the most important scholars in religious studies fields. But personally, he kind of shaped, or his work shaped, everything what I think about religion. So I would say that Mircea Eliade and Rudolf Otto, who was another obscure religious thinker, these are two people that everything what I think, what I do about related to religion is somehow connected to this. And also he was friend of Junger, so there was a connection. The second person, it could be surprise because she was not philosopher or thinker as such. I would like to have Octavia Butler, who was a Black feminist American science fiction author, and what she was doing in her work is to me is absolutely mind blowing, because everything what again I'm interested in, the question about how to survive, what is community, what is the relationship between the religion and the community and individual. It's everything is in her writing, even questions of kind of post-humanist or transhumanistic ideas, they're all there. So I really would like her to be there. And the third is probably the most obscure, because it's a Polish thinker. His name was Marian Zdziechowski. He died in 1938. He was aristocrat and conservative thinker, but at the same moment, he was trying to, and I'm kind of cheating here, because when I was thinking about the third person, I was kind of between Mikołaj Berdyaev and Lev Shestov, so Russian thinkers. Mm-hmm. But Zdziechowski was trying to translate Berdyaev, Shestov, Soloviev, and other kind of 19th century religious thinkers from Russia, from kind of Orthodox Christianity, into Catholic Poland, and in fact into Catholicism. And what is connection between Butler and Zdziechowski is that both of them are kind of expecting the end of the world that is coming soon. For Zdziechowski, he was absolutely right. The Second World War was end of his world. But in the same moment, they are both, and Zdziechowski was very much interested in very ethical approach to Christianity. He published absolutely amazing book on cruelty. The title is On Cruelty, and it's really brutal criticism of Christian church, especially of Catholic church. So this is three people that I would like to sit and talk together, and I think that this very different perspective, but common interests could make interesting.
So is the question there with respect to what happens to community after religion in the face of some sort of future event?
Yes.
Okay. And is that what, in terms of architecture, is that what you're trying to head towards? Is how do we understand the spaces that we inhabit when we also understand that we're heading into an uncertainty?
You're absolutely right. This is fundamental question that I'm trying to answer. I use recently, I published article on Rudolf Otto. Rudolf Otto, the most important book is on what doesn't mean the sacred. And he kind of defined not religion, but a religious impulse as a moment when human being is challenged by the unknown, fundamentally other. And I was using this kind of framework to talk about this gap between what we know and what we don't know. So the science is trying to cross the gap, but religion is kind of making acknowledgement that this gap will never disappear. And of course, we progressing in knowing the world, but this ontological gap between what we know and what we don't know, it's always there, and it's kind of existential challenge to us as human beings. So yes, I'm in my work also as architect. I'm working with this.
So it's sort of like Kierkegaard's leap of faith, but in architectural form. So what does an architectural leap of faith look like?
Well, it's rather the word that is fundamental to everything what I'm doing is context. Mm-hmm. And for architects, especially kind of contemporary architects working in a current system, we kind of tend to ignore the context. So when building is not even built, the moment when the documents are submitted and you got paid, you kind of tend to forget that you have done it and just move to another one. This is the kind of mainstream way how architecture industry works. And of course, there's many people that are trying to challenge this. And this is also what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to think about process, about architecture as coming from somewhere, in the sense that materials are coming from somewhere, that people are going to construct the building are coming from somewhere. The whole process of construction the building is creating not only building itself, but it's also creating this community of people engaging that. And then the building and the space stays for sometimes make a difference. And architects are always kind of, even if they said they are not doing this, they are kind of optimistic and they believe in future, because they believe that the building that I built will stay here for, 10, 20, 50 or 100 years. Yeah? So we kind of try to imagine how this world in 50, 100 years will look like. And of course we can't, it's all speculation.
So it's sort of moving away from atomization, but doing so without getting caught up in a sort of pseudo-traditionalism.
Yeah, I don't even think in these terms, to be absolutely honest. I'm thinking about community, but again in a pretty critical way. Mm-hmm. So the question what community is as a community could be also oppressive, but community at the same moment provides a support. But when you work in architecture, when you think about creating a building, in contrary how architects are very often presented as this kind of individual geniuses, again the point of reference was Ayn Rand with Atlas Shrugged. This is the vision of architect, but architecture never works like that. You always work with other people, with your clients, with builders. Those are always pretty big network of people that you need to interact, and kind of understanding how this network works, how this community works. This is what really fascinates me.
Okay. I'm sure some of these ideas will come back in, but moving on to your book. So why did you write this book? Because it's sort of I don't mean to be crass, but an academic risk to write a book using Junger.
Yes, but as I said before, I like to be the only architect in the room, and I'm happy to be seen as a kind of academic weirdo, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So good. I'm for example, as far as I know, I'm the only one architect member of British Association for Studies for Religions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's nobody else like that. So, and also being Polish, so immigrant. So it kind of gives me some kind of freedom of being a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. Why Junger? As I said, I know Junger or his work for some time, but the most important reason is that the majority of urban studies or discussion about the city has a kind of Marxist foundation. So most of kind of mainstream urban studies are somehow related to Marx and post-Marx thinkers. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely respected those, fantastic body of work done. But at the same moment, I always, and there's a kind of growing feeling that we are missing something. And a few years ago, I published a book. It was edited book on radical inclusivity in architecture and urbanism. And the radical inclusivity, to me, now it's used in a different contexts, but to me, it was strong religious context again. The kind of roots were religious, coming from origin from this. I think he lived in 3rd century, and he had an idea called apokatastasis. So he was struggling with the idea that the hell exists. Yeah, so the God was one, and then he created the world, and then after the end of the world, chunk of what he created will be excluded, as hell. And he was really struggling with this because it kind of questioned God's omnipotence. Yeah, so the God is not perfect because he creates something that it just didn't work. So apokatastasis is the idea that on the end of the day, everything will come back to God. So those very serious consequences of this. But for me, this idea of being inclusive, of not rejecting anything and anybody, which if you look on this closely, it's pretty conservative idea. I'm kind of growingly fascinated by this. And Junger is a person who, in my mind, allows me to think in this kind of beyond dialectical mode of thinking. So when Junger is talking about triangulation or this stereoscopic view, it allows to go beyond dialectic thinking, especially Marxist dialectic thinking, but it also goes against Carl Schmitt, for example, the idea of the friend and foe. So everything what I really have kind of ethical problems with that. So Junger was my guide, was someone that I hope that will be able to help me to stop thinking about the world that's better than the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. One thing I want to ask is, in what way do you see sort of radical inclusivity as a conservative outlook? Because I think a lot of people now would sort of vehemently disagree with you on that.
I wouldn't. I would prefer not to go into this too deep. But if you think, for example, on the question of abortion, so radical inclusivity puts abortion as a well, very difficult question, I would say. So this is the one of elements of radical inclusivity being conservative, but conservative in that almost kind of literal sense of the word, to conserve, to allow everything to try, not to destroy anything. So from that point of view, I think that it is potentially pretty conservative perspective.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Just to comment on this, when I was a young person, I was right wing. I was conservative. Now I don't think that I am, but I think that it's rather from my perspective, the whole world just moved in a very strange direction. So suddenly I can feel kind of related, I don't know, to Maoist more than to any kind of conservative thinker. But it's strange feeling, and I don't feel guilty. I don't think it's kind of I moved. I really feel that the world moved.
I think it's Robert Anton Wilson says that a conservative stood still becomes left wing in 20 years. But I always like the idea that the people seem to forget that the whole spectrum moves in different ways around them and through them, and so if you stand still, everything else is still going to change in relation to your viewpoint. So yeah, I think that's there's an impossibility of not changing politically. I think to not change politically, you have to constantly keep up with something. So you mentioned the stereoscopic view of Junger's. So how does that sort of affect the way that you perceive community and our understanding of the city?
Again, I'm not a philosopher, so I could be, of course, wrong in my interpretation. But to me, the stereoscopic view that Junger is dealing with, I think that the first time when he made it relatively clear was in the Sicilian letter to the man on the moon. And in this text, he was talking about the moon as a kind of mythical figure that, it exists in mythologies, in magic, and, in poetry. And at the same moment, he of course knows that it's celestial, it's a physical body, you can measure it, it exists, in a kind of very empirical perspective. But what he's saying that there's no reason to choose one or another. And in contrary, it's only by seeing this kind of not reductivist way that you see this as a myth and as a physical body. Only then you can start to see something more. So this is the kind of triangulation. There's the moment when you kind of open any dialectical or any dualistic view into third perspective, and then in another one, another. So this is extremely important to me because, as I said, the word that I think, if I could choose one word to describe everything what I do, is context. And this is the moment when you think about community again as a part of the context, and you stop thinking about yourself as an individual, and you start to think about what is connecting you with the world outside you, and then you start to question you as a kind of autonomous subject, and you start to see you as a subject as a kind of blurred, porous, weird structure that's a kind of going beyond you, but also this external, beings are penetrating you. So there's another thinker that I am referring to in my book. It's a Chinese thinker, Zhao Tingjiang, who is talking about all under heaven, Tianxia system. But his criticism of European thinking is exactly along these lines. So he was referring definitely to Carl Schmitt, and he said that, for Schmitt, but he said for all European thinking, political thinking, the politics and what is political starts with individual, with one. And he said that, Chinese thinking is not rejecting the rights and freedom of individual, but what is political starts with relationship with someone or something out. So you need to have at least two beings to even start to talk about political. So this is a connection also between Junger and kind of other thinkers. And this is how I see this kind of stereoscopic view.
So do you think that the Marxist view of, the Marxist view, in its sort of abstraction, when it's with its focus on value, production, labor, do you think that sort of overlooks the idea of community that you have and the idea of the individual that you have, that you end up getting caught up in abstractions which aren't exactly helpful to creating a communal or inclusive space?
Yes, those are several attempts of changing or mutating or morphing Marxism. You have Sartre with existentialism, and the other things is that Lefebvre was one of, again, probably the most important thinkers or theoretician talking about the urban space. So of course there was attempts to go beyond the abstraction and go into daily routine and life. But I still think that something is missing in this analysis, and probably I would say that they're all kind of one-dimensional. So the way how I'm looking on the world is that those are layers, those are scales, and it's kind of me being architect is coming back here. Yeah, so I'm looking on the city, and I know that city will be drawn in scale 1 to 10,000, and then it will represent something, particular processes and structures. But then when I go to scale 1 to 1, I will talk about something different. But then when I go into the structure of materials that I'm using, then I'm going kind of beyond human beings. Yeah. So we as architects, again, tend to see the world only from our scale. Yeah. And it's fine. It's good. Yeah. It's important that we design for people. But at the same moment, we must be aware that there are much bigger scales and there's a much smaller scales that influence what is happening with us and what's going on. And I think that this is also what's kind of missing in most of these analyses, that they tend to be this kind of 1 to 10,000 scale perspective. That's a kind of looking on the world, on the city from this kind of bird view point of view.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of something that has come up on the podcast quite a lot. I mean, I've been doing this Michel Serres series, and he has a theory of communication. So if you take it, understood it as love, people often say, well, love's just atoms, right? But that's one level of communication. The way we actually experience love is another. And you could say that in a community, that's a whole other level of communication. And he makes it clear that if you begin to view everything from one level of communication, then you end up sort of putting yourself in a straitjacket. And it seems is that how you see what Marxists are doing? Is you're viewing the city from this certain level of sort of abstract value communication, whereas and subsuming everything into that level of communication and understanding everything from it. And in doing that, you just block out everything else which is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I said, my kind of, I try to think and I see the world in a pretty ethical way. So, the Marxist has this element of tension, of conflict, of war, of exclusion. And again, I respect it. When I look on, the employer-employee, of course there's a tension. But it's not only tension. There's also something else. There's a common goal. There's, friendship could be. So this kind of economical perspective that is trying to define everything what we do is definitely not enough to understand the world around us. Mm. So I absolutely agree with what Sarah is talking about. Even if I don't know much about it.
That's okay. You also state that the book should be read as a stroll in the forest. Now, is this in relation to Junger's notion of the forest, or is it just sort of just the way it should be read?
Both. So in relationship, there was a figure of forest rebel. Mm-hmm. That I think it's interesting how Junger is kind of not progressive. I think it's not progress, but it's a kind of he's taking different perspective, and partly it's his personal approach. I don't see it as a program. It's rather how he see different strategies to deal with the world. Yeah. So there was the worker. There was on the other spectrum. Part of the spectrum is the anarch, mm-hmm. But there was also the rebel, forest rebel, who is, it's a kind of similar way that this non-dialectic thinking, because forest rebel is someone who is beyond the world and the structure and is in the same moment inside the world. Yeah. So it's someone who exists in the system and beyond the system. And the forest, as I understand from Junger writing, is this kind of subconscious of civilization. So it's a space not only for freedom, not only to escape, but it's kind of a reservoir of myths, of religion, of anything what is it's hidden. It's what it kind of mainstream discourse doesn't exist, or it's kind of excluded, but it's there, and it will never disappear. So this is how I see it.
So in that sense, do you think the forest rebel can actually exist within the city?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he or she can exist in any situation, and city, like everything, city is not only one dimensional. It's not only, capitalist machine to exploit its residents. It's not only to generate profit. There's different layers and different modes of existence of city. So yeah, absolutely. I can aspire. I would like to be forest rebel. I can't afford to be anarch, but I think that it's a model that I would like to be able to follow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's a price to pay for being subsumed entirely into the city and getting lost in the city?
Well, it depends who you are, of course. So when you take kind of extended Marxist perspective, if you are rich, then you exist in different way, and if you are poor, you exist in different way. You always pay a price. I don't really like the narrative of paying the price, but I understand what you are saying, and when you make one choice, it means that you're rejecting other choices. Yeah? So in that sense, yes, there's always a price that you need to pay.
Okay. So what is total mobilization, and then what is total urban mobilization?
I think that the first time because as far as I'm aware, Junger is using this term in 3 texts. So first of all, in essay, Total Mobilization, which was published in 1930. And I also read it in a kind of chronological way. So this is the first time when I came across the term. And I was also much younger. And maybe because of that, I have seen this as a program, how to utilize the life, the vital force that exists in every human being for a greater good. Yeah. So how to somehow use, but use in a positive way. It's not kind of exploitation, but kind of put in work every human being to achieve something bigger, something, more grander. Then, when I read Der Arbeiter, the worker, when Junger, he sees himself as a seismograph. So it's less a program, it's more as a kind of description of what the world is and what the world is becoming. And then the Total Mobilization was just a description of the world that there was no escape from. Yeah. So whatever you do, he's writing, for example, it doesn't matter if you for whom you vote. The very act for voting is just putting you as a part of the system. You by every act you just make the system stronger, which is pretty terrifying perspective. But then after Second World War, he published an essay on peace, and he started to write this essay in 40s. It was published in 1945, so exactly when the war was over. And again, in this essay, he's talking about total mobilization for peace. So this is definitely a program. Yeah? So he's again creating the vision of the world where nobody is excluded, and where our lives are put together to achieve something better. So this is kind of in between kind of description and a little bit kind of totalitarian vision, and on the other hand, it's a very positive, inclusive way of thinking. So of course, I'm kind of picking up these elements that I ethically agree. So the vision of no waste, that nobody is excluded, and it's also the way of kind of avoiding alienation, but not in Marxist sense, but in the sense of giving meaning to everything what we do. Yeah? So he's talking about the kind of the most kind of not interesting, trivial jobs that people can do. But if they know that it makes sense what they are doing, then they are okay with that. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, this is what late David Graeber was talking about, this bullshit jobs. Yeah? Yeah. So it's exactly what Junger is arguing against. So he's not talking really about kind of communist revolution. He's just talking about giving meaning and this feeling of belonging to something important as a total mobilization. And in that sense, total urban mobilization is a kind of attempt to start to think about the city that is not excluding anybody. That's kind of allowing each of us to feel at home in the city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you agree with that notion of the city and of capitalism in that it subsumes everything back into it, and you're instantly just this sort of lost cog in its sort of parasitic mechanism?
Yeah, again, there's discussion about the capitalism. Yeah, that I'm not a philosopher. I'm not going into this, and if I'm talking something really stupid, just forgive me. But you have here in the podcast. Unfortunately, I forgot the name. There was a Danish scholar who said that he rather see current system as a kind of neo-feudalism than the capitalist system.
Old Biao.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, and I agree with this description. So even if I'm using the term post-capitalism, I'm kind of less and less bothered about capitalism itself. I think that it's very kind of 1990s vision that, well, capitalism is, kind of prevailing, and it's unstoppable, and this is what kind of Zizek was saying, that's easier to imagine the end of war than the end of capitalism. I think that the capitalism is already history. Yeah. Capitalism is already dead to some extent. Mm-hmm. It's a power what is really important. Yeah. So capitalism was just one of systems to redistribute the power and agency, and it still exists. Of course, it's still powerful, but it's not the essence what's going on. And the fact of this growing, not even 1%, but it's kind of 0.001%, kind of super rich people that they own more than half of human population, is kind of proof of that this promise of capitalism as a force of progress, innovation, and this kind of natural way of being, it's a lie. It doesn't exist. So from this perspective, if you look on city has many different layers, and part of that, and the kind of externality of the city is capitalist system, of course. So city is not anymore like it was in 19th century, where the capitalist was in the city, the banks, the finance, the labor. But now city is rather the place to be exploited. Yeah, the capitalist is more global. The capital is more global. You need, I don't know, three months to move factories from one place to another. So from that perspective, city always had elements of not being capitalist, and these elements, they are still there.
Mm-hmm. So you think for the post-capitalist city, we need to sort of dig out these elements and emphasize them, and almost can't remember what you call it, but an agent on the inside.
Well, I think that the biggest problem with, as I said, I believe that we live in a kind of post-capitalist moment, in the sense that capitalism is not always not anymore the answer, but in the same moment we don't know what can come next. Mm-hmm. The problem that I see is that capitalism is still giving us the most efficient language to communicate between economic actors. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different not capitalist regimes that exist, from very bad like slavery for economy of love, of gift, that's everything like that. All these regimes, they exist, but they are very small, they are local, and they don't have a language, they don't have an efficient way to communicate between themselves. And this is what, finance is giving. This is what capital is providing, this kind of hegemonic language. But I think that this is also slowly disappearing in a very, good or bad way. There was a few weeks ago. There was in the Economist was an article. Economist is definitely not a radical magazine, and the article was about the new ways of kind of non-financial ways to deal with business, and so when you look how different economical actors are communicating, they not do this like human beings, like we, that you go and pay for something. This mechanism, when how these different services and bits are evaluated are much more complex and complicated. And I think that, this is where we are heading. Yeah, so.
Okay. So I'm always skeptical of after capitalism because it's tough. It's tough to define. So when you might have already touched on it, but do you have a sort of a way to define post-capitalism?
No, as I said, I think that post-capitalist is now. So this is easy to define. This is the moment when the narrative that there was no magic money tree. And then, few years later, when there's a pandemic, then suddenly, we can spend, billions, no problem. Yeah? So, it just, exposed the lie that it's power what is really important. It's politics, really, not really the capital as this kind of abstract force that's making everything and organizing everything. But I can't imagine, of course, what will be next. I don't know what is behind the horizon. I just know that the logic that we operate it's not anymore satisfactory.
Jumping back to the Anarch, which has come up on this podcast a few times. What's your sort of personal opinion of the Anarch in relation to what we've been talking about and this sense of community? Do you see them as something that's needed or almost as a detriment to this idea of community?
This is also the reason why I would like to have Butler and Junger sitting in the same room. Because, and maybe Eliade as someone in between who would be able to understand and kind of help Junger to understand Butler and help Butler to understand Junger. Because Junger is a white, rich guy from center of civilization, of a hegemonic Western world. So for him to imagine being anarch, it's kind of easy. Mm-hmm. But for Butler, who was poor, black, coming from really kind of bottom of the society, even if, she tends to be pretty critical about the religion, she was atheist. Mm-hmm. She was pretty critical about the community. In the same moment, she understands the power and positive aspect of religion and positive aspect of community. That her position is that, as a black woman, poor black woman in US, you just can't afford to be anarch. There's no way that you will be able to do this. Well, at some point, of course, when she was recognized and successful writer, then you can start to think about that, kind of having your own life beyond the structure, but not before. So it's really I don't see anarch as it's sometimes I see it as a kind of arrogant kind of white man privilege perspective.
Do you think that there's shall we say a diverse equivalent of the Anarch, which a mentality which could cross borders?
Maybe because if you go beyond the kind of Anarch as a privileged position and you go into I don't know, Italian operaists that they were talking about rejecting the to work and rejecting of consume. Yeah, so this is this kind of hermit. This is someone who kind of try to withdraw from the world. That kind of Thoreau. Even if he's he was not fully hermit. Yeah, so I believe that you can try, and it is possible. But even in this kind of traditional way of seeing hermit, there is someone who is wise. Yeah, so he or she is making sacrifices to be beyond the system, but his or her role is extremely important for the society. This is still someone who is providing this external view, this point of reference. Yeah? So if this is this perspective that you are making sacrifices, you kind of going beyond, but you're still available. If anybody needs your help, then that's fine. There's kind of different type of anarch.
Okay.
But that's not I think what Junger had in mind.
Okay. This sort of connects to the surprising arrival of neo-reactionary politics in your book, which, now you say it, do you think that they are doing the same thing? That it's like an arrogant retreat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that they know what I was referring to, that capitalism is dead. So what they are trying to do, they know that capitalism could exist only as exploitation, as a destructive force. Mm-hmm. So they need zombies, they need this biomass, they need us to kill, really, yeah, and then to escape, to create. So I see them as people, as really arrogant people that they just want to be the last man standing. Yeah. So there's no hope in that. It's just, kind of escape and survive as long as they can, but it's not giving anything. And if you see this as a potential ways how cities are organized, this is kind of gated communities. There's a private cities, there's chatted cities. So there's all this idea that we can kind of escape from the world. We can create our own bubble that we survive the storm. But well, if the storm comes, I don't think that there will be much to survive to.
So for you, the importance is that you have to begin from a position of altruism, or at least some altruism.
Again, I don't really think that. You can call it altruism, but I see it as a kind of interdependency, really. That whatever you're doing, again, the pandemic was really good experience from this kind of seeing world in a more ethical way. That people like me, university lecturer, even if it was tiring, teaching online, but there was no problem for me I still have my job. I was able to sit in my apartment and have my food delivered. But there was a people out there that they were, picking the crops and putting boxes and delivering this food to me. Okay, so without them, I would die. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this is how I see it. That I'm dependent on other people, and so it's not really altruism. It's just understanding that we don't exist alone. We don't exist as really individual.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a post-capitalist city, there's this emphasis then on, should we say, a personal and local understanding of the network that you're reliant on. In what sense, there's I guess some people would see it as a danger of a return to like a traditionalist way of living where you're friends with the baker and the butcher and you all sort of trade off in that way. Do you think that that's even a possibility? Or do you think that because of modern technology and the way that that's heading, that you really are going to end up with almost like a combination of those two? So almost like the absolute oxymoron or paradox of traditional technology in some way, or technological tradition. Something just doesn't make sense.
No, I agree. I think that it's not only because of technology. Technology is allowing us, helping us, to have this conversation. And the project that I'm doing in Brazil, I'm doing this even if I was not able to be there. Mm-hmm. I was invited to be visiting professor in Brazil, so I should be there. But pandemics happened. But technology allows us to. Again, I'm dependent on my colleagues in Brazil, so they are doing field work, not me. But we are doing the project. So of course, technology is part of that, but there's more. I think that definitely the incoming or happening already the climate disaster, climate change. It also makes us aware that we are not able to kind of retract to the small community and kind of ignore everything else. So the awareness of being dependent on much broader ecosystems, it's there, and it should stay. But in the same moment, you are right that this elements of rebuilding communities, rebuilding local interdependencies, they are very, very important.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to add about the book that you feel like we've missed, or something that you'd like to add in?
I don't know. I think that the book is pretty dense. I got one very angry email from a reader that he said that I bought this book because I believe that you give me guidelines how to go to this new, better world, and this is just the kind of a lot of name droppings and theories, and it's completely useless to me. So he was really, really, really angry, and also academics books are pretty expensive, so and he bought it instead of find it for free somewhere. So yeah, I think that if people are expecting to have clear manual how to achieve the better world, they will be disappointed. So I would strongly recommend not to buy it, not to read it. But in the same moment, I hope that there are elements allowing readers to think about the city in a different way. A little bit beyond this kind of political divisions or left and right. In a kind of joking, I would say that the main argument of the book is that if you are really conservative, you should be communist, something like that. But no, to be more serious, I hope that there's elements of thinking that will be useful to readers.
Mm-hmm. Are you working on any books at the moment, or working on anything currently, other than the Brazil project?
Yeah, the Brazil project is kind of bread and butter. It's very interesting. I really like doing this, but I would like to. This is the project that I started, and it's probably the most important to me. It's attempt to connect architecture in a spatial thinking with religious studies and with religion much closer. So I was touching upon this. So I published a chapter, I published an article, but I would like to do this in a much more serious way. But it's a kind of project that I hope that I will do till I die. So it's a kind of long-term project.
Very good. That seems like a good place to finish up. Krzysztof, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.